Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have an excellent game to share with you from round 2 of the 2025 Uzchess Cup. This was played on June 20th. On the white end, Praggnanandhaa playing against Shamsiddin Vokhidov. Okay, the opening we have here in English with move 3, bishop b4, e4. From here, d6 is played. If black captures the knight, and then e4, do know that white can regain the pawn in a couple ways. You could go after e5 or g7. Queen d5, queen g4, both landing with forks. So black does not bite on c3. It's d6, e4 now secure. I should note, once e4 is in, d4 is a hole. And black will frequently shy away from this capture now on c3. Yes, you would saddle white with doubled c pawns, but at the same time you would repair that hole on d4. So for the most part out of this opening phase, it's fairly non-confrontational, each side going for their own little setup. Just a little bit of tension here on the queen side with b5. White doesn't flinch, stays put there on c4, continues here with bishop g2. The knight is pinned, white can't take twice on b5. Taking on b5 here would be a poor decision, piecewise and pawnwise. Piecewise, the rook is helped. Pawnwise, black gets to respond and take towards the center, meet the capture away from the center, the capture towards the center. So we just continue here with bishop g2, rook b8. Castles, bishop c5, eyeing the weak square. And from here, rook b1. So I had to think about this one for a little bit. The computer points out b3 and rook to b1. Why is maybe b3 played here? I believe white is saying with rook to b1, I may in some case consider playing two squares with my rook if available. So for instance, if black immediately hops to this weak square, you could try to squeeze just a little bit more out of the b pawn and go 2 steps instead of 1. At this level, it's a game of inches, having your pawn on b4 rather than b3. Maybe this is an approach. Black is not so quick to give up control over that b4 square, carries on with castles. White here, out of the pin, ready to roll next with f4. And from here, we have h6. Now, I'm going to play out a handful more moves, how it is played in the game, and I'm going to be coming back to this position and drawing some attention to an alternative to h6, rook e8. Let's see how these next few moves play out in the game. After h6, we see f4. Now, before f4 can be played, Praggnanandhaa had to calculate some forceful moves that are available to black. First, we see a capture on c4. Follow-up, knight d4 is played. Here's the thing. If black in this position, rather than improving the knight, captured on f4, how are we recapturing? You could take with the pawn. You take with the piece. Black has the e5 square as a nice pivot for a knight. You would take with the pawn in this position, knowing that you are okay against these follow-up knight g4, queen h4 check moves. It's close. It's really close to being a disaster here for white, but white would be there just in time. This is one of the lines Praggnanandhaa had to calculate before playing f4. Let's see how close this is. Knight g4 check, queen h4 check, only move. Bishop takes g4, only move to defend the bishop. And now there's a bishop f2 move. You have to give up the exchange here. It's saying rook takes bishop at this stage. This last move cuts out the idea of challenging the black queen. Nearby, there's knight b4, kicking the queen away from defending that bishop, and it's not easy to challenge this piece either. Knight here, there's bishop captures knight. Queen captures bishop, and from there it'll be a mate in 2. Rook captures bishop is here. At the end of this line, we're looking at the 2 minor pieces versus a rook imbalance, and 2 black pieces that are attacking the white king, but these 2 are not enough. White is for choice here. +1, approaching plus 1.5 territory. Now, let's go all the way back and draw a comparison now with this move here, rather than the move in the game, h6. And note a key difference or two. If rook e8 and f4 in this position, we may be going straight into a draw. Let's see why. Black could first open up the b file for the rook and the e file for the other rook, and now hop into g4. How are these moves different? We've seen all of these moves before. Same, same, same. You got to take. How are things different here? Well, in this position, there's no pawn on h6. Rook e6 to h6 is now an idea. A third attacker in this case, and white would be in an only move situation. Would have to play f5 here to cut out rook h6, and that concedes a square. Drawback with f5 is e5 is available to the knight, hitting with tempo. From this point, we could see a perpetual check with queen h4, queen e1, and if white wants to avoid the perpetual blocking, in comes the knight. Looking at this f3 square, what do you do about that? Queen g3, we could have yet another perpetual, in this case with a knight. Knight f3 check, knight h4 check, back and forth we go. So, important differences, in other words, between, at this stage here, going all the way back, important differences here between h6 and rook to e8. Rook e8 and f4, maybe we're heading straight for a draw. Okay, how it is played here, h6, a square has opened up for the knight. This is an idea to watch over g5, maybe pave the way eventually for queen h4 moves, if that square is available. In comes f4, b file opens up, knight d4. Notice the knight only hops into d4 after the rook has been unleashed on that b4 square. No b4s in this position. We have f5, invasive pawn, heading for a kingside attack now. In comes a5, g4. There's no sacrifices, no knight moves to worry about in this case with this pawn on f5. No bishop to eventually capture on g4. No tricks available on this square at this stage. It's bishop a6, b3, hanging on to c4. And from here we have c6. Now, one of the moves the computer has its eye on here, rather than c6, which is cutting out a square from the knight, maybe hinting at a d5 advance. Black still needs some support before that's a thing. This here, one of the moves the computer wants to go for. At this point here, and even a couple moves later, it's shooting for a4, relying on some tricks. It's a very nice move here. What's its point? If you keep the structure as is, if you collect the pawn here with the knight, that would leave the rook on b1 unprotected. The b pawn officially pinned. Black could now continue with bishop takes c4. Black is for choice here. So, in the event of a4, you would just sit here as white, look forward to maybe improving this knight here. Okay, at the end of the day, a4 not played, c6 it is. Follow up now, knight g3. This may be tempting g5 break, meaning a capture with a recapture. Knight is in a pin. The problem with that, if you go for this, big problem, knight g4, my favorite move to touch on in this game. Knight g4 is there with check. Bishop falls next. So not yet is this an idea. First knight g3. Now this is right around the corner. g5 takes, bishop takes, knight g4. There's queen captures knight defending the bishop. Okay, black now makes use of that h7 square, holding up the g5 idea. And from here, white capitalizes on the weakness of black's last move, the knight no longer around. Controlling h5, the knight hops to that square. Now, a couple of the moves the computer has its eye on are queen d3, securing c4, or bishop d2, lending some support to the b1 rook here. Both of these moves combat this a4 idea. All right, in this game, knight h5 it is. And at this stage, black plays g6, and this is an error. Not quite losing, but something tips in white's favor at this stage after g6. At this point, it wants to go with a4. This tactic, this undermining idea on the queen side is still available to black. Black never goes for it, though. It's g6 in this game. And let me throw this position too as a pop quiz. How would you respond here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay, before Praggnanandhaa went in for knight h5, he must have calculated g6, and he was prepared to swipe the pawn on h6. The knight does not have to move. Bishop captures h6 is top. Black's response ends up being a losing move. He ends up capturing the knight. Now, what's considered top here, the only way for black to stay in the game is with queen h4. And we could have a variation like this. The imbalance here is an exchange. White is up the exchange and a pawn. The evaluation reads about plus 0.5. So where's the compensation exactly for black? Why isn't the evaluation more? Being up the exchange here and a pawn. Dark square problems. Short answer, h4, f4, d4, all holes, black with an unopposed bishop. That's some of the positional compensation for black with such a line. It's a very important bishop that's being given up to win that exchange. That's the better bishop, the good bishop. Okay, black does not find this only move. Ends up capturing the knight. White is winning from this point on. Very instructive to see these aggressive moves now by white. We continue with g5, paving the way for queen captures h5. Black goes with king h8 here. If knight captures g5, queen captures h5. What is this knight supposed to do now? If you try to defend the knight with f6, it'll be a mate in 2 on g7. And if the knight runs away, that one's going to hurt you. Queen g4 with check, looking at that g7 square. Okay, you can't save the knight if you're capturing in this position here on g5. So it is king h8, queen takes h5, rook g8, and now looking to just give this knight a shove. Very direct play here. g6, follow up, pawn captures on g6. If the knight moves, you could take one step back, queen h4, she's stable, and next up, we're ready to move the bishop, land a discovery. Big trouble here for black. All right, it's the capture here on g6, follow up, rook b7, knight f6. At this stage, you could react in a forceful way, swipe the knight, queen captures, and then bishop f8 is mate. So rook b7, rook f7, rook takes rook, pawn takes rook. Where's this rook supposed to go now? All of these squares are under white's control. The try from here is rook g7. If rook f8, there's queen g6, looking at that g7 square, queen f6, you could exchange queens, win a full rook. So that's not going to work out. Also, rather than rook g7, if black goes for this, that's not going to work either. This is still way too much. This idea to promote straight away. There isn't a good response here. Okay. The try is with rook g7. From here, rook f1. No need to collect the rook. Still keep an eye on that promotion square. Black is essentially working with the pinned rook here. Queen f8 at this stage. Now, if black tries something else, it feels awkward, or looks awkward here. Queen f8, blockading the pawn, playing opposite the bishop like that. If, let's say, d5 is played here, opening up the bishop size, okay, one piece maybe is helping out in black's defense, but two white pieces would be springing to life after d5. So after d5, we could have a capture. The minors have access to e4, and soon thereafter d5. It's not going to end well for black with d5. Queen f8 is the try. And from here we have the capture on g7. If you take with the queen, you could promote straight away, so the king must recapture. The king is now on an open file. So you may think, okay, let me hop right to it right now. That would not be a good idea. The move played here is h4. If rook g1, this would let black off the hook. Black would have a saving resource here with knight e6. The rook is hit. There is no good discovery. Any bishop move with a discovered check is met with bishop captures rook. Check. Also, the knight has an eye on this f4 square. Notice in this position, if queen g4 check is played with this fork, there's king captures pawn defending the knight. All right, the move played here, h4, follow up bishop c8. If black tries in this position knight e6, notice how things would be different. Queen g4 check, now working with this fork. No king captures f7 here. The knight falls. So the try here by black, bishop c8, bishop h3, bishop captures bishop. You could recapture. It says you're still winning with this, but very direct play. Rook g1 check. Black is not coordinated on any of these g-file squares. Just covered once. King moves to f6. What other option do you have if you go to the corner? Rook g8. You're collecting the queen. Here's the thing. You're collecting the queen no matter what black does. King f6 in this game. Rook g8 still. If queen e7, queen g6 is mate. And if queen captures pawn, that's the move in the game. We see now queen h6 check, king e7, and after rook g7, black resigns. The queen will be lost from here, and soon thereafter, one of these minor pieces, completely winning position for white. Notice in this final position, the knight here on d4, occupying the weakest square in white's camp, right? But how effective was it? It was conveniently worked around as white pursued this attack on the king side, and this bishop on c5 its presence was never really felt. Anyhow, your thoughts with this one? Feel free as usual to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care. Bye.